Russian oil is flowing through Ukraine again in the middle of a war between the two countries. After roughly 3 months of disruption following a January attack, oil is flowing through the Druzhba pipeline, which carries Russian crude to Central Europe through Ukraine. Kyiv stopped the flows transit for repairs after damage caused by a Russian airstrike. Supplies to Slovakia and Hungary have now resumed. So despite the war, despite sanctions, and despite years of promises to cut ties, Russian oil is once again reaching parts of the European Union, which raises a stark question. Is Europe still helping to fund a war it's trying to stop? Sergey Vakulenko is a senior fellow at the Carnegie Russia Eurasia Center. He's 25 years of experience in the oil and gas industry as an economist, manager, executive and consultant. Until February 2022, he served as head of strategy and innovations at Gazprom Neft. That's the oil branch of the Russian energy giant, Gazprom. Welcome to the day. Let's start with the resumption of oil deliveries through the Druzhba pipeline. Talk us through the significance of that.
Well, Hungary and Slovakia receive their crude oil from Russia via that pipeline. They do have alternatives, but that's definitely the most convenient and cheapest route for them. And the refineries, the Slovnaft in Bratislava and Duna pipeline in Hungary, they were built and designed for Russian Urals blend. So it's also the most convenient blend for them. And when they get their oil via that pipeline, the economics of the refining is quite spectacular. And when they are forced to work on alternatives, they can make the ends meet, barely, but don't really anything above that.
OK, so their decision to link the reopening of Druzhba with the removal, with Hungary's decision, I should say, to link the reopening of the Druzhba pipeline with the 90 billion euros in loans to Ukraine. That was more than political. You say that the difference for Hungary in those alternative routes is significant financially.
Money-wise, yes.
Yeah.
Hungary, it's interesting. Slovakia refinery Slovnaft is also operated by a company called MOL, which is a Hungarian national oil company. So it's actually linked between the two. These refineries can get enough oil via alternative routes to supply their domestic markets. So it's not an issue of, vital situation without this pipeline. These countries could go dry. Even if the refineries would shut down, they could probably supply themselves with fuel supplies from neighboring European countries. But money-wise, it's important for both countries and for MOL as a company.
OK. And Hungary and Slovakia received lots of criticism for holding up this loan to Ukraine. However, if you look at the wider picture, I do recall at one point it was being said that EU countries, the bloc as a whole, were paying Russia more for its energy supplies than the bloc was actually spending on supporting Ukraine. Is that still the case?
That's definitely not the case, and that's a bit of a cheeky calculation when it was said so. But also, oil and gas are fungible commodities. So yes, Europe at the moment still is buying quite a lot of Russian LNG. That's the main item of Russian energy exports. But yeah, sure, Europe might not buy Russian LNG, might buy LNG from some other sources, but that LNG would be sold elsewhere, and it's really the shippers who would get richer, and not particular difference it would make for Russian revenues.
OK. And another thing that people will find hard to understand is that Ukraine and Russia are clearly at war. Ukraine is bombing Russian energy exporting infrastructure while still allowing Russia to pump gas and oil through Russian pipelines under Ukrainian territory. Can you explain that apparent contradiction for us?
Indeed, the strange times we live in. Gas, not anymore. There was a standing contract between Russia and Ukraine for gas transit that expired on December 31st. 2024, so no gas currently is making it through Ukrainian territory. But oil, yes, oil is going to Hungary and Slovakia. These countries argue that they're being landlocked. It's vital for them to have that link. And then they say, well, Ukraine, we are part of the union that supports you. And yeah, if you want to keep receiving European support, well, keep letting Russian oil to go through its territory. What's even more ironic is that Russian oil is being refined into diesel in these Hungarian refineries. This diesel makes it back into Ukraine and fuel Ukrainian military, which fights Russian military.
Okay. These are indeed strange times. Meanwhile, EU countries still paying Russia billions of euros for energy, which Russia is putting into its war with Ukraine, at the same time as Europe is spending those billions backing Ukraine. So we've gone through that. Do you think it's possible for the EU to achieve a complete break from Russian energy?
That was definitely the plan that was adopted by EU Commission right before the war in the Persian Gulf has started. And now there's quite a lot of pushback to it. Well, Europe can probably do without Russian oil and gas. The idea was that there is enough LNG around the world to supply Europe without having to buy Russian LNG. And also without having to buy Russian pipeline gas. There is still 15 billion cubic meters going via Turkey and then to Bulgaria, into Serbia, Hungary, and Slovakia. Serbia is not an EU member, so you could take that out of the balance, but the bulk of that 15 billion cubic meters goes to Hungary and Slovakia. There are alternatives to that gas, albeit costly ones. And then, of course, when the Strait of Hormuz got closed, the overabundance of LNG in the global markets suddenly turned into shortage. Again, LNG is fungible commodity. Just like how it happened with oil, Europe stopped buying Russian oil. Russian oil now goes to India and China. India buys Russian oil instead of buying oil from Persian Gulf. Persian Gulf oil makes it to Europe. Something like this could happen to LNG as well, but with Qatari LNG getting stuck behind the closed Hormuz, it's more difficult.
Okay. And so prices drop as demand is cut. Then prices rise as the Strait of Hormuz is blocked. Explain to us how important oil and gas revenues are to the Russian state.
Oil and gas revenues comprise roughly a quarter of the state income. So it's a substantial chunk, albeit it's smaller than what it used to be. It used to be about 50%. And again, that's dependent on the gyrations of oil prices. Gas is actually a very small element to it. It has always been smaller. Gas is a much smaller share of revenue in general. So gas provides roughly 15% of that 22. Bulk is really oil.
Okay, so a significant
when it comes to the...
I beg your pardon. I thought you'd finished. But a significant proportion of 20-odd% of Russia's economy dependent on its oil exports.
It's state income. Russian
right. Okay.
Economy is.
Interestingly, though, Germany halted its imports of Russian pipeline oil, but continued to import it through Kazakhstan through Russia. So Russia was still benefiting from transit fees. Now Russia is banning that transit. Explain to us why Russia would cut off this income stream and annoy its regional ally Kazakhstan.
Transit fee is really small change, so it's not crucial to Russia whatsoever. I would think there could be one or two reasons, or a combination of the two. One is that Russia might say, well, sorry, there are some technical difficulties, so we can't accept your nominations to Germany via northern branch of Druzhba. However, we don't want to cause any problems. You could easily supply Germany if you want by marine shipments. So you could send that oil to Ust-Luga and Primorsk, exactly the harbors that were attacked by Ukrainians a couple of weeks ago. And it's just a very short very short tanker hop to either Gdansk or Rostock, and there are pipelines from Gdansk and Rostock to the refineries that used to buy the oil via pipeline. The idea behind that would be that this use of Kazakhstan and Germany of these two harbors would serve as a shield against Ukrainian attacks. That's one theory. And another theory is, at the time of shortage, as it is now, it would be quite difficult for the refineries to find a replacement. And if so, they might go to Russia and ask Russia to supply oil via pipeline, for example, instead of Kazakhstan, or Safa. So this would make put Germany into a difficult position. Right. Either it would have to relax sanctions regime, just like Donald Trump had, or it would suffer, and the suffering would be concentrated in the area of Germany where German government already has rather weak support and AfD has stronger support, and AfD would probably not miss a chance to mention that if AfD would be in power, this wouldn't happen.
Thank you so much.
So these are the competing hypotheses.
Understood. Thank you so much for talking us through that, Sergey. Sergey Vakulenko from the Carnegie Russia-Eurasia Centre. Now, the EU has approved a long-delayed loan of 90 billion euros for Ukraine, along with new sanctions against Russia. The breakthroughs came as European leaders gathered for an informal summit in Cyprus. The cash infusions had been held up for months by Hungary, but last week's election there has lifted a cloud.
It feels like a fresh start. Even as the wars in Iran and Ukraine continue to dominate the agenda, in the picturesque Cypriot town of Ayia Naapa, known for its wild party scene on the Mediterranean coast, Europe's leaders are here to celebrate. This is their first summit without Prime Minister Viktor Orban, ousted by Hungarian voters.
Now I see the possibility that the voting mechanism of European Union will be not misused, and 26 countries will be not taken as a hostage of one country.
I think it's important that we meet in a complicated geopolitical situation, and obviously when there is less opposition on some issues, that is good for Europe to speak with one voice.
The relief is immense. Just hours earlier, EU member states finally approved a 90 billion euro loan for Ukraine. Hungary had been blocking the urgently needed funds for months, after originally agreeing to it last December.
Today is a good day for Ukraine and for Europe. The more Russia is doubling down on its war of aggression, the more Europe is doubling down on supporting Ukraine.
In a surprise move, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy also attended the summit in person. His country reopened the Druzhba oil pipeline, allowing Russian oil to flow once again to Hungary.
We are neighbors, Ukraine and Hungary, and I think that our people need to have strong, warm, good relations. I really wish new government all the best. Peace. We are ready to work together, shoulder to shoulder, to help each other.
And the EU now wants to press ahead at a rapid pace. Negotiations on Ukraine's accession to the EU can ramp up.
The next step is to open the first cluster of negotiations for the Ukrainian accession to the European Union. We delivered on these two steps, and we will deliver in the next step.
But this summit remains a crisis summit. Since the start of the Iran war at the end of February, energy prices have soared. So the party's on hold as leaders continue their discussions into Friday.
Let's catch up with our correspondent, Lucia Schulten, who is at the summit in Cyprus. Welcome back, Lucia. The 90 billion euros, that's an awful lot of money. Where's it coming from and what's it going to be used for?
Well, it's going to come from the financial markets. So this is going to be a loan which is going to be backed up by the European Union and its member states. We have heard today from Ursula von der Leyen that the agreement is that 1/3 of it will go into Ukraine's budget. That means that they can pay bills to keep the Ukrainian state running, and the other 2/3 will go into Ukraine's defense. We have also heard from Volodymyr Zelenskyy, who is a guest today here at the Leaders' Summit, that he is planning, or they're planning, to rebuild energy infrastructure, that it's been a hard winter and that they have to put a lot of money into rebuilding. So this is and this is where the money is primarily going.
OK. The EU also approved its 20th sanctions package against Russia. What's in that? It's looking like we've lost the line.
Pick certain
things.
Oh,
you're back.
To start with, we have lost the line. Very good. So I'm back. So I just said I'm going to only pick little certain points because it's really quite comprehensive. So to start with, this is going to hit, the sanction package is supposed to hit revenues that come from the energy, the selling of energy, the oil that Russia is selling still to the world. So they're trying to reduce the income that Russia has from energy infrastructure, but there will be 120 listings of individuals and entities. That means that there are transaction bans, that people cannot travel anymore. There's also going to be economic sanctions. Banks will be hit, and also, and we have seen this before, vessels from the so-called shadow package that is already in force until today.
Weirdly, all of these measures only became possible after Ukraine made sure that the pipeline pumping Russian oil into Europe was back up and running. So what are EU leaders saying about the EU funding Ukraine and funding Russia's war machine through oil revenue?
Well, this has not been discussed today, so European leaders, when they came in, did not mention this especially. But what I can tell you is that the European Union is really working on phasing out Russian energy. So there's already the plan to phase out completely gas by the end of 2027. And the European Commission is also working on a plan to bring forward, to put a legislative package here to the legislators and the member states to also phase out Russian oil completely. So the European Union is aware of this and they're working on a plan to solve it.
OK, thank you for that, DW correspondent Lucia Schulten.